Welcome to BJEM News.
I'm Micah Peters.
And I'm Jonathan Wertz. It's 7 o'clock Wednesday morning. And today we will interview some important people to learn about the amazing architecture and culture developing religion of Elizabethan England. So let's get started. Palaces were an important part of Elizabethan England. So here with us is Ben Pratt interviewing a historian who works at the Hampton Court Palace.
How did Hampton Court become the palace it is today?
Well, in 1236, Hampton Court was nothing but a little rickety barn.
And then it expanded into a massive palace for
Yes, in the 1400s, the Grange became a great place for royal visitors, and it conveniently sat between royal palaces at Sheen and Byfleet. Giles Daubeny took out a lease on the property in 1494. By the early 1500s, the Grange had been turned into a palace.
What happened?
Daubeny actually became Lord Chamberlain to Henry VII.
How did the king feel about Hampton Court at the time?
Daubeny was rewarded, most definitely, by a series of visits by the English royalty.
Who moved in after that?
Henry VII moved into the palace in the mid-1500s.
Was that one of his more important palaces?
King Henry VII, in fact, had 60 or so palaces, but he visits Hampton Court Palace most often. It's also the most decorated palace.
When was it finished?
Hampton Court Palace was finished in 1540 and is still the most sophisticated modern place in England.
Hampton Court Palace must be so expensive. What exactly is it?
Hampton Court Palace has everything. There's tennis courts, bowling alleys, kitchens covering a total of 36,000 square feet, and even 1,100 acres of private hunting ground. You can bring all your friends too. The great dining hall can seat up to 28 people.
Is there a man named Wolsey that has something to do with the palace?
Yes. Wolsey was the chief minister for over a decade. He built a vast complex at the site of the palace, but in 1528, when Henry was granted a divorce by the Pope, Wolsey lost Hampton Court Palace and York Palace.
Did Henry's family stay there?
All of Henry's children currently live in Hampton Court. King Henry also spent all 3 of his honeymoons here.
Is the palace the same since Queen Elizabeth took power?
Yes, pretty much. Unfortunately, the Queen hasn't built too much into the palace.
Wolsey built that house a long time ago. Is it still intact?
Again, unfortunately, no. Most of his house is no longer standing after the previous king's renovations. The parts of the original kitchen, though, are still authentic Wolsey kitchens.
Thanks, Ben. Now here's some information on Tudor-style homes and priest holes.
Tudor-style homes combined elements of Renaissance and Perpendicular Gothic styles to make a style that is new all its own. They first began when our great King Henry VII came to power and ended when Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth I died just a century ago. Tudor-style homes had many different variations and came in a couple different sizes. They had the capability to be as large as a castle or as small as a cottage, but all of them had a frame of diagonal beams to support them and whitewashed walls. However, as many of you know, the rich have recently had much better homes than the poor. The poor had crude, thatched roofs, while the rich had fancy roofs made of wood and covered with slate. However, our people in the lower class know what it is like to live in the city in order to get a cheaper home, while the rich homes were spaced out. Both the lower class and upper class had entrances that were designed for both decoration and protection. However, the richer people could afford more decorative items such as tabs of stone and brick wall, batten and board doors, luxurious black metal door hardware, and arched openings. Rooms inside the homes had oak paneling on the walls, and they had beds with 4 posts and curtains hung around them. And though it was expensive, many people had wallpaper installed on their walls. These outstanding homes also have chimneys made of stone and brick with chimney pots. Carpets were very expensive and were only affordable by the rich. But even though the rich people were able to afford this luxury, it was so expensive for them that they hung it on the walls to avoid it getting damaged. To soften the floors, mats of reeds or rushes have been sprinkled with nice herbs and put on the floors. As you all know, there have been a couple of different ways to light these homes. The rich people had expensive beeswax candles. The middle-class people used animal fat candles, and the poor people used rushes dipped in animal fat. As far as telling time goes, the rich have learned to use clocks, and the very rich people used pocket watches, but most people only had pocket sundials. Furniture was also abundant, but so far it has lasted a couple of centuries, and we expect them to last for several more. Tudor-style mansions were owned by the rich, and they had many qualities, including many towers, a large number of gables, many parapets, balustrades and chimney stacks, fountains, gardens, terraces, and pavilions. In the end, Tudor-style homes are important to our culture. Priest holes were also a vital part of the culture within the past couple centuries of our life, but this time in the religious aspect. Because Queen Elizabeth wanted England to have its own religion, trade, and foreign policy, the Catholics tried to overthrow her rule. However, as we all know, their attempt failed, and Queen Elizabeth outlawed all Catholic priests from living in England, and she sent out soldiers known as priest hunters to search for these Catholic priests. To avoid being found, Catholic priests hid with other families in their homes. These families built hiding places for the priests inside of places of their homes, such as attics, staircases, and fireplaces. They added their own alterations to disguise these priest holes. Priest holes were very small and often low in sanitation and food, and Catholic priests often had to stay in them for days. This hiding of priests occurred between the 1550s to 1605, when the gunpowder plot was at its height. Ultimately, priest holes had a lot to do with the culture of Elizabethan England.
During this time period, while Queen Elizabeth was in power, she persecuted the Catholics. She did allow some religious tolerance, but they had to pay special taxes, and some were executed, burned at the stake. Here's an exclusive interview with the former Pope that was shot mere hours before he was thrown out of position and became human barbecue.
So nice to have you on here. It's quite the honor.
Yes. Yes, it is.
How did you get the power you have?
Well, you see, when I set up the church, it is the only way of teaching. It is the only way we will show the people. If they try to go any other way, they are naysayers, and they are heretics, and they are horrible people. We show them one way, the right way, the path to heaven, the church.
What if someone disagrees with the church?
What? A disagreeer?
No, I'm just speaking in a hypothetical situation.
Oh, well, in that case, they will be swiftly killed.
But what if they're a perfectly good, moral person?
Ben, you are murmuring, buddy. You're gonna have to say that again a little louder. Keep it filming. I'll cut that out. Say it louder.
But what if they were a perfectly good and moral person in other regards?
We'll burn them at the stake.
You have a large amount of wealth, correct?
I got pounds for days, fam.
How?
You see, there are many ways that the church and the Pope specifically collect their monetary payments of the week, of the year, of the month. We have a collection service at the end of every single church service where the people give their money to the high and mighty church of the world and of England. Then, as expected, the people must pay 1/10 of their salaries to the church, which is an extremely fair payment for the one way to the golden gates of heaven. And also, for every christening, wedding, or burial, it must be paid for by the church.
How does it feel to be the head of the church? How does it feel to be the head of the church?
It feels fantastic to be the closest man to God, except to God. I am the king's king, and all are before me.
Wow, your ego is almost as big as your stomach.
Guards!
That is all we have on religion and architecture today. Join us next time on VGEM News. Except there won't be a next time.
I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Micah Peters. But anyways, stay classy, San Diego.